So Dr. Jane Pilcher will be presenting surnames and surnaming in families formed through adoption. Dr. Pilcher is Associate Professor of Sociology at Nottingham Trent University in the UK. As a self-described sociological names nerd, and I love that expression, Jane studies people's names to analyze, understand, and deconstruct identities and inequalities. Her current project examines names and naming in experiences of adoption.
Hello, I'm Jane Pilcher from Nottingham Trent University, and today I'm going to be talking about names in adoption. I'm presenting on behalf of a project team who's looking into this set of experiences amongst adopters and adoptees. There's limited evidence worldwide about names in adoption, but what is available shows us that first names matter, forenames matter for adoptees' birth heritage, culture and identity. Surnames in adoption is even more an underexplored topic than first names are. But evidence here suggests that surnames are important for adoptive family making. In other words, adoptive parents change the birth surname of their children to match their own or to align with their partner's surname. And this new shared surname or part shared surname is meaningful for cementing and displaying the belonging together of the new family unit. To our study then, our study is the first to examine names in adoption in the UK and one of only a handful worldwide. We recruited adults to our study, adult participants who had been adoptees or adults who were currently adopters, and we used life story methods to capture their name stories. We used creative writing booklets and then we did follow-up interviews. We've organised data on surnames from our participants around several themes. So first then looking at our data from adult adoptees, and the two themes that are important here are family making and unmaking. This is where surname change due to adoption is recognised by adoptees as being important for the shared family identities that they have come to belong to in terms of the adoptive family. But as adoptees also see these things as having detrimental consequences for their birth family belongings. The second theme is flexibility of choices and uses, and this includes around marital surnaming. So this is where the multiple surnames experienced by adoptees in their lives can empower some to make situational or permanent adjustments in how surnames display their meaningful family belongings. To the first theme then, this theme of family making and family unmaking. Surname change and surname alignment in the context of adoption was certainly viewed positively by some adoptees in our study. So Tegan, on the far left of the screen, says, "I love having my adoptive surname, I do. And you know I can see why I got it, and you know it means I feel connected to my adoptive family. It's a good thing." Similarly, Eddie, second from left, says, "I think if you're adopted into a family, then I think it's fair enough to carry that family surname. It's practical and it's true." But for other adoptees like Carol or Paul, they were angry that their birth surnames had been replaced by adoptive surnames. Carol wrote that the birth family surnames of adoptees should not be changed. They should not be stolen, taken, removed or altered, and that my original surname is my birthright. Similarly, Paul wrote about surname change as damaging to the identity of adoptees, causing a disconnect with your clan, your place, your forebears. Names that tie you to your identity, hugely important to many people, their inherent being, their mirroring of facial features down the generations. So our findings here suggest that for adult adoptees, surnames are as much about family unmaking and identity unmaking as they are about family making. The second theme in our data from adult adoptees about surnames is flexibility in choices and uses. Here, some adoptees in our study wrote or spoke about how their feelings about surnames had shifted over time because of a change of one type or another in their family relationships. So Tegan had strong attachment to multiple surnames. We quoted Tegan earlier where she explained in her interview why she loves her adoptive surname. But Tegan's birth surname was very important to her as well, especially since she'd re-established contact with her birth family. As you can see on the bottom centre of the screen, Tegan wrote about how her now stronger identification with her birth surname seemed at times to burst out. I'm known sometimes, when asked for my surname, to say Young instead of Watson, and then have to apologise as that's not my legal surname. Even though it's not my legal surname, I try to recognise I haven't lost it, as there's nothing stopping me identifying with it and seeing it as mine still. Other adoptees like Evelyn on the far left of the screen used birth surnames in particular contexts. So Evelyn used her birth surname as a pen name because she was a writer. Others used them in email addresses or as passwords. The choice and use of surnames by women adoptees in our sample who were married or had been married were framed not only by their adoption but also by the wider cultural context of patriarchal surnaming. So for some like Philippa, being someone as an adoptee who'd already had a surname change, this added an additional layer of complexity in decisions made about whether or not to change their surname when they got married. So Philippa says, when I got married, I decided not to change my name. This was partly driven by a feminist belief in not changing my name to my husband's. Perhaps the real reason was a feeling that others had already made decisions that had changed my name a number of times previously, and I didn't want to do it again. For other women adoptees, choosing to change surnames at marriage was accompanied by very strong identifications with their married surname, again because of a prior history of surname changing as an adoptee. So Louise, in the top middle of the screen, says, when I got married, my surname changed and I was so happy. It's the most significant moment in my life in terms of my identity. My surname means more to me than my first name. Next then, we look at what adopters had to say about surnames in their lives. Two themes stood out in our analysis of adopters' name stories. The first is family making. Here, alignment of surnames between parents and children is seen as a foundational family practice, fundamentally important both for the cementing and the displaying of adoptive family togetherness. The second theme, gender dynamics, is where women adopters spoke about how the recognised benefits of sharing a surname in their adoptive family unit nonetheless required some navigation or negotiation in the face of patriarchal surnaming conventions. So this first theme then amongst adopters is family making, and here there's a strong assumption that changing the child's original birth surname to their own surname and or that of their partner was a completely normal and necessary practice. This is explained by Annie Baker on the far left. Annie says, we originally fostered Addie. When we adopted, we all felt it was important to take our family name Baker. This helped us and her to feel like we were actually going to be a family, which we'd all been working towards and hoping for some time. Dr. Robert Fry in the middle talks about the same thing, but more from the point of view of his child. I think that's important for our child's identity as well. So to grow up feeling that belonging to a family and to see us as mum and dad really would be possibly strange to have a different surname. One of our solo adopters, Kat Bragan, wrote in a not-to-be-sent letter to her child about the sharing of their surname. "The same last name as me. I jumped for joy on the day you finally became a Braggan. I didn't think it mattered to me as much as it did, but some days I pinch myself that you get to be called Braggan." So for adopters, surnames are very meaningful for family making and for displaying family belonging together. The second theme in the adopters' accounts is gender dynamics. Women adoptees were kind of conscious of the benefits of sharing a surname for their collective adoptive family identity, but nonetheless they spoke about how this had to be navigated or negotiated in relation to their own individual identities. Iris, for example, on the far left here. She explained in her interview that her maiden surname was really important to her, and when she got married, she kept it because it was really important for her to keep her surname. But when they adopted a child, her and her husband felt it was important that we all had the same surname. She discussed possible strategies with her husband to try and resolve this dilemma, including him changing his surname to her surname or giving their child her surname as a middle name. But for various reasons, none of these strategies were seen as viable. And in the end, Iris reluctantly conceded. She gave up her maiden name, her birth surname, to keep it simple. And so the display and cementing of her family's identity of belonging together was achieved by everyone sharing her husband's surname, despite this outcome making Iris cry. She was so upset about it. Unlike Iris, Sophie Wright, in the middle quotation there, came to an agreement with her husband to pass on only her surname to their adopted child rather than his own. When I married, we talked about me taking his name, but it's quite hard to say, it's quite hard to pronounce. I also didn't like the idea of being a Mrs. something when I'd worked so hard to become Dr. Wright. I didn't want to lose that, so I kept Wright, and our child has my surname. For some women adopters in our study, double barrelling of surnames was the way forward to achieve this desired outcome of family making, but at the same time giving the option of retaining their own birth family surname. You can see on the far right of the screen there what Ellen Hall Parrish says about her experiences of double barrelling surnames. First when she got married, and then using this double-barreled surname when her and her husband adopted their children. So, some conclusions then. Our findings show that for both adoptees and adopters, sharing a surname in part or in whole is important for family making and for displaying belonging together. But especially for adoptees, family making through shared surnames with adopters also entails a family unmaking of birth family surnames, of birth family relationships, and so too an unmaking of adoptees' individual identities. Our findings also suggest the distinctiveness of adult adoptees' experiences of the multiple belonging functions of surnames. Over time, adoptees' feelings about birth surnames, about surname change, about adoptive surnames had shifted. For example, when they'd first discovered that their birth surname had been changed, when they got married or had their own children, when they reconnected with their birth family if they had done so, or when they experienced a bereavement in or an estrangement from their adoptive family. For some adoptees, this array of surnames that they identified with and the family belongings they felt at different points of their lives gave them a permission to be flexible in the choices and contextual uses of these multiple surnames. Our study also evidences how gender identities matter for adult adoptees and for adoptive family surname practices. Women adoptees and women adopters both had to navigate and negotiate around the additional complexities within adoptive family life of the gendered dynamics of the way we signal family belongings through surnames. Overall then, our findings show that surnames have various complex meanings for the family belongings and identities of adult adoptees and for the family making practices of adopters. We hope to feed our findings into policy that might benefit both adoptees and adopters, and training for social workers and adoption professional practitioners. Thank you for listening. Here are some references cited in our talk, along with the project's website address, if you want to find out more about the project. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.
And thank you, Jane, for this presentation. Do we have comments or questions? Alexa, did I cut you off? It looked as though you were starting to say something.
So I do have a comment. I'm not an adoptee, but I grew up with the experience of a parent who had a slightly different skin color than me. And because my parent had a slightly different skin color, people were constantly challenging us. And this even presented a logistical problem for our family. Like if my father wanted to travel with just me, it would be really difficult because at immigration, that people would think he was kidnapping me or human trafficking me, even though we have the same last name. And so I would be curious, what's the role of skin color in this? Because my guess would be if people are adopting children of a different skin color, they would be more insistent on having the same last name just for the logistical purposes of like.
Okay. Jane, I'm not sure that Jane is here. Perhaps, Jane, can you type your response in the chat, and I'll be happy to read it. So in the chat, Cleveland asked, do you know of any examples of adopted persons in the UK who kept their birth surnames from the beginning? And Jane responded, no, all children's surnames seem to be changed when they are adopted. Is that a legality? Is there anything in the law that allows a child to keep their original surname? And then Evangeline asked, do you happen to know if double barreling for married and maiden name is more common in the US than in the UK? And Jane responded, I think it is probably more common in the US. And I don't know if you heard Alexa's comment about, I'm trying to hope I'm remembering it correctly, where she is of one ethnicity and her adoptive parents were of another, or I don't know if it was adoptive parents, but one parent there was a difference in their appearance, and if that had anything to do with adoptive surnames, if that might have anything to do with adoptive surnames. Ah, there we go. Jane responded, we haven't come across that issue, but there can be a problem if parents and children don't share surnames, especially at border control, which would be an issue. Then I will ask, what?
Let me give you an example from the Arabic culture.
Okay. An example from the Arabic?
For example, an adopted child, for example, like children in Gaza now, they lose all the family, the parents, all relatives, and then the baby is adopted. The family that adopts the baby will not give their name to the baby. The baby will return his or her father's name and family name. But if the baby's identity is not known, people don't know the family, then they make up a name for the baby. because in Islam, the family that adopts a child cannot give their name to the child. Because like me, if I'm having my father's name, my family's name, surname, this means that I belong to this family. But the child, by birth, does not belong to the foster family. So they usually make a nice name for the baby. But if the father is known, the family is known, then the baby will be named according to the father and the family's name. Another issue in naming, for example, when I get married, I don't take my husband's name. In our Arabic culture, Saudi culture, or Muslim culture, in most Muslim communities, because in some countries they do, we do not change our surname. I return my maiden name. We don't change our maiden name.
Remy, if I may, is that then to keep the clarity of the genealogy, to keep it more clear? Clarity
Yes.
of the bloodline?
If a woman gets remarries 3 times to different people, so it's confusing to keep changing her married name. You wouldn't know who she is. But me, even if I marry 10 times, then I return my maiden name so people know who I am, whether I'm married to one person, 2 people, 3 people, or I'm not married at all. So people recognize me and can identify me by my surname.
Interesting.
That's
Thank you. Jane has responded a couple of things here to more specifically to
well,
your
that's me.
point.
I'm from Arabic culture.
Okay. Jane has said, I don't have any participants in the Arabic culture, but I am aware of the practice that in adoption, the children keep their birth surname. And then there was another question.
No, if the family is known, like for example, sometimes there is an accident and the whole family dies and the baby is left alone. One clear example is children in Gaza. Because sometimes everybody, the uncles, the aunts, the grandparents, the brothers, the sisters, father, mother, they all died. And the only survivor is the baby. So in this case, if the family is known, the name of the family, then the child will be named after his father and surname, his family name or her family name.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Beth asked, are there any examples in the UK of the birth parent's name being removed from the birth record? And is the adoptive parent substituted? And Jane responded, in the UK, birth certificates are replaced by adoption certificates, and birth parents' names are removed in the process. Beth commented, that's interesting, so different here in the US. And I'm wondering if that goes back to the whole idea of confidentiality and of the stigma perhaps associated with, especially if the child was born to an unmarried woman, or something similar.
Yeah, in our culture also, if the child, we got, let's say, illegitimate child, and somebody adopts that child, then they make up a name for the child, like a surname,
Right.
which is neutral.
Interesting.
Yeah, because in our culture, it's not like in America, you have 2 names. For example, Mary, Christine, like that. My name is Rima, and then my father's name, grandfather's name, and then surname. I can even go up to 7th grandfather in the genealogy.
Wow.
So this is how we are named. Whether a boy or a girl, the first name, the father's name, grandfather's name, and then the family name, the surname. So what happens, they make up like 4 names for the child. A
So
father's
then it,
substitute,
right.
but
All
it
right.
should be neutral. Because in Arab countries we have tribes and we have family names that are
Right.
known. So they try to make up, they call him Muhammad, Abdullah, Ibrahim, for example.
Interesting.
No
Okay.
family Ibrahim like that.
Okay, Jane has responded, adoptive children are treated in law in the UK as if they had been born to the adoptive parents. So this is a legal thing, not a tribal thing, but a legal thing here. Most children now adopted in the UK have been removed from birth parents because they have been deemed to be giving them inadequate care. And that, yes, I think the same may be true in the
That's
United
another
States.
issue, yeah.
It's not so much about unmarried mothers, James' response. And Beth commented, the naming practice is fascinating, Rema. So there you go.
Well, we don't have this practice like in, let's say, Sweden. If the parents mistreat the child, then the government takes the child and would put the child in a foster home, something like that. We don't have this practice.
Okay.
The child stays with the parents forever, as long as they wish. And parents don't give up their children. We don't have this. You have the child, you're in charge of the child. You have to take care of the child. It's not like when you buy a dress, you don't like it, you throw it away or you take it back. It's not like that.
Yeah.
So we do not have this problem.
So again, the things that we don't even think about when it comes to naming that are cultural, if we don't have the context, we don't know.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question or comment. If anybody has something, or Jane, if you would like to make a final comment. She did apologize again for the mic problem, and yes, thank goodness you pre-recorded your talk. Michael, did you want to say something or? No? Okay.
I'll give you just one example, I was in Kazakhstan, and a friend of mine, she wanted to adopt a child. So what she did, her brother gave her one of his children, a boy. He was 2. And she said she wanted to name the child according to her husband. And she said this in front of me. I said, no, you cannot do this by Islam because he has a father.
Okay.
It's okay. You raise him, you take care of him, but he should be named after his father, not your husband, because her husband is not his biological father.
Right. All right. It is time for us to move on to the next session.
Okay.
Thank you very much to all 3 of our presenters. And
Really?
I will now turn the microphone over to the chair of the 4th session.